computer like I'm some type of noob. Let's see. What is going on, everybody? I'm Justin Thomas. Welcome to Top Shelf Fandom, going over a little bit of a rebranding, but still the same show. And we are going to be talking about Westworld today. We're going to be talking about the influences of Westworld and how we can make these great connections and enjoy Westworld even more, but also find other properties and works to enjoy. I am joined by Johnny B. Crazy and Cam, and I will go around and let you guys introduce yourself, say a little something about yourself, say a little something nice about me, because I need to check the sound on this other end and need an excuse to transition away. And we'll get started, everybody. If you're in the live chat, make sure to put in any type of feedback and anything that you think is crucial to know about or anything you want to know more about that we're speaking. And always appreciate you guys. Give us that feedback and welcome. And thank you for joining us. And we'll go to Johnny first. How you doing, Johnny?
I'm doing pretty good, Justin. Thank you for having me on. And it's always a pleasure, man. And nice to meet you, Cam. I'm so excited for this stream. Thank you to everyone in the chat. And if you haven't, go check out my channel. I do Westworld, Game of Thrones, a few other shows, stream all the time. Other than that, let's get down to brass tacks, man. I'm ready to talk about this.
Okay. I'm Cam. I don't have any particular media presence, like with regards to streaming or anything like that. Justin and I began talking a bit more in depth about some of the things that I had brought up in previous shows in the chat. And a few weeks ago, he and I wound up actually having a rather long conversation about Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And I had asked him if he intended to do anything regarding the similarities between Brave New World and Westworld. And he wasn't really aware of it, but I had gone through YouTube channels and kind of gone through various other things, the internet, and I was also looking at interviews between Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy to see if there had been any particular published connection between the two, and there really wasn't. And Justin thought it would be a really good idea to have a show that really kind of touched on the similarities and the parallels and the corollaries between Aldous Huxley's Brave New World and what we're seeing as an audience with Westworld. So after a few conversations, Justin actually invited me to be on the show. So I'm actually really happy to be here with both Johnny and Justin.
Yeah, well, I couldn't be more proud to have you. You know, it's always best, like I said, to have the person that's got the smartest questions in the chat to probably get on that stream. No, you are just a well of knowledge, and you have a formal and professional background in psychology and neurobiology and things that pertain. But this isn't necessarily going to be a stream about like, oh, look at all the cool connections we found and stuff like that. It'll be a little bit of that, but the purpose of this is to kind of set up what I hope to be an ongoing series of streams, because there are so many with just even a Brave New World, but all of the properties and works that inspired the Westworld that we love so much that we really want to talk about them for more than, hey, isn't this cool? But more of why is this an inspiration, and how these themes run throughout everything from the artwork to the immersive theater, to the novels written, to the original Westworld. But it's not just so you can be like, that's a neat fact. It's kind of like if you like a certain dish. This is what, when me and Cam were having one of our, ending conversation with me is usually long, unfortunately, for the other person. But we were having a conversation about, I said, I always struggle with content to make, because it's like, I feel I don't want to make content that is cheap or doesn't have substance, meaning I don't want to be like, oh, this person might be a host, or do something I don't really believe is of substance. And I want also to do more than the look how much I fucking know show, because I do a lot of research and I know some things, I know a thing or two, but that's not really entertaining either. But what's beneficial for you guys, not only on an intellectual level, but is entertainment. If you love Westworld, just like with the dish analogy, you like a certain type of food, we find out what ingredients are in that food. We're going to find other dishes that you like. We know your palate. We're all going to have a similar palate. All of these works not only have cool connections that are fun to know and are fun to tell you guys about, but also are going to help you have other stuff. Because how many times are we saying, man, Westworld is a year and a half away, or Game of Thrones is, you know, I can't wait for the next season. So you're rewatching the same thing, which is fun as well. But hey, you know, this is going to open you up to other works that are hopefully going to be just as exciting, and they're going to enhance your enjoyment of the current show. So it's really a pleasure to have both these guys on. Johnny, I love working with you. I love your stuff. And Cam, hey, welcome to YouTube. It's a terrible place, and I'm happy to have you here with me. So shine a little bit of good on it. So we will start with Aldous Huxley. Full disclosure, there is no documentation of them ever citing this, and it's just impossible once you hear the connections that it isn't an inspiration. Even from the base level, it's just almost exactly what I've spoken about a few times about how we can do Westworld without the tech, meaning you can deconstruct the story, you reverse engineer it. What do you need? Well, that's Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And if you guys are familiar with 1984 and Orwell's work, you'll see similarities and stuff like that. But everything that has an inspiration, you know, something, if you can keep going down this rabbit hole, like we'll talk about Alice in Wonderland, everything, even Huxley, we could go and see what influenced him and whatnot. But we hope this to be enjoyable for you guys. And this will be hopefully able to cover a good amount of the connections here, but we will be going further into these connections because especially with our first one that Cameron's about to lead us off with, it runs deep and it is very fascinating. But I have made a pact to myself that I will shut my mouth and not get sidetracked on this one. So we'll see how it goes. AU, unfortunately, was supposed to join us. He could not make it. He will be with us for the next one. I just want to say there's nobody out there that's done more for small channels than Au Packmule, and I hope you're able to see this, buddy. So thank you for all that you've done for me on a personal level. I appreciate it. So sorry you could not be with us. You will be missed. And you want to take us off on A Brave New World, Cam?
Yeah, and I do agree with Au Packmule. He's been absolutely fantastic. When he saw that I was first kind of gravitating towards your channel and the just general discussion, he he linked up with me with YouTube and things like that. And although he and I haven't had a chance to really kind of discuss things one-on-one with each other, he really has been fantastic. And I see in the chat where he's really supportive of other streamers as well. Okay, let me start off. So, talking about Brave New World, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, he wrote it back in 1932. He has a different vision. It's a bit of a contrasting vision from George Orwell's 1984. Where both societies, his and Orwell's, are oppressive totalitarian states, but in very different ways. His particular setting is one of comfort and conformity and stability. The basic setting, which is what I want to run through because there's a lot of interesting parallels with what we see with Westworld, is in his setting, there's basically a global community. At one point, there was a really big war, and then basically the powers that be got together and said, okay, this nonsense of tribalism has to end, so we're going to fix it. So they've created this sort of utopian global community. And within this community, humans don't reproduce. Humans don't reproduce normally. Basically, the society has absolved themselves of traditional pregnancies and the womb, and instead, what they do is they grow embryonic clones in a lab. And it's interesting the parallel with, as we're seeing the population of Huxley's Brave New World and the growing of the clones with regards to, or in parallel with, the hosts being created, and a bit of a parallel with the creation of the hosts and the cradle. But in Huxley's world, these embryonic clones, as they grow up during their infant and childhood stages, they are conditioned to fit into a particular paradigm. The clones have different categories, alpha through epsilon. Alphas being kind of the most advanced and genetically engineered and preferable. The epsilons being the lowest on the totem pole, and they're given jobs like menial labor and menial tasks. But the parallel with regards to the programming of that particular consciousness and that particular outlook is very interesting as well, because as we know, in Westworld, the hosts are programmed with a particular response, particular personality. They may have a much larger role within Westworld, or they may have a very minor role. But in Huxley's world, we have this established order of where these cloned humans are purpose-built.
Pre-programming, per se.
Yes.
Yes.
And the genetic coding actually does work as a particular, as genetic engineering does work as a
Like the originals, right?
program. Yes. So in that we're introduced to the director. In the very beginning, we're introduced to the director of the hatchery. The hatchery.
The hatchery is your Delos.
Right. There could be a parallel that we could see, that kind of the hatcheries and the centers for conditioning and all of that are parallel to the Mesa, but that's a deeper discussion. We're introduced to the director of the hatcheries, and then we're introduced to the world controller. And both of these men have extraordinary influence and control over how things are built, how people are assigned to various roles, how basically the world is structured, how it follows and forms. They, in a way, kind of direct the narrative of this new society. Now,
people are putting castes as well. They even use that, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a caste system.
A specific set schedule of everything, correct?
Right. And what's interesting is that your position in the caste is met with a particular envy and disgust. You envy those above you and you admire them, but you kind of despise and denigrate those below you so that you won't really want to be them. You're like, oh my God, I don't want to be an epsilon, but God, I really admire the alphas. I really want to be an alpha. But what it does is it's kind of a bit of a twist, that it allows social control, because people don't want to move outside of their caste system, because the people at the top end of the scale kind of denigrate and despise the people lower in the caste system. The people lower in the caste system cannot move up in a social hierarchy. And then the people in the middle of the caste system certainly don't want to be thrown further down the ladder. So everybody's kind of content with their particular station that they've been programmed with since birth. Now,
you have all these levels of hosts too.
Yes.
World, so
yeah, absolutely. We see that as in Westworld, we see that as the hosts are created, there's also a way to program them on the fly if need be. We see with Maeve at one point, Maeve was a bit of a minor character, being a homesteader. And then later on, she's moved to the Mariposa, and then they program her up and give her a much more major role for the guests that are coming in to be the madam.
Oops, sorry for interrupting. Somebody's got their, Johnny, I think we're getting feedback from you. Do you not have headphones on?
I'm muted, man, so it can't be me.
No, it's coming from you. Check it really quick.
I'm muted. I got my headphones on.
Maybe it's...
I'm good.
Check.
I think I had just a glitch for a second. It's gone now because I heard it for a second do an echo.
Ooh, my apologies. I blamed you immediately.
Of course
No,
I
I just
did.
thought because it was on your level. Would I see it the with your connection with Westworld, we see a much more nuanced, satirized um take on society, on the constructs and how we have a certain amount of predestination and pre-programming. And I like how Huxley, like what you're talking about, Cam, is this is much more heavy-handed, but he was known for satirizing, right? He is flipping the constructs of what life was at this time. He was basically a commentary on industrial revolution and a world where there was no want or need for anything, because that's bliss for us. We think in our head, at least, and that's what both shows want to make you think about, at least, for not their whole theme, but it is definitely part of it, is what is, what is happiness? What is a blissful existence? If you don't want or need for anything, is that something that you would be happy in? For Real the Forge kind of addresses that. But I love how Huxley has such a heavy-handed satire of it, because it's really, really efficient in the book, because it just is another way. Westworld shows us with AI how people have it's nature versus nurture. It's how much are we really in control of our life? What makes you you? These are all questions posed across the line. But they didn't have artificial intelligence back then, so they're using pretty much the artificial birthing, and they're making everybody content in where they're at, because they can't give them choice, because they have a system worked out, so nobody wants for anything, right? But they don't have a choice to move up in the job, so they don't want them to have desire. So it's in the same way Maeve's desires and her her affection and hostility is turned up through their paths. They do the same thing in A Brave New World, right? They just control them through it's more heavy-handed, again, because it's written in 1932, but they shock them through the floor when they reach for a book and stuff like that. So would you say it's just a really just heavy-handed satirization of the social constructs in how they form who we are as people, how we have a certain amount of a lack of control in our life that we don't like to admit?
I would certainly say that, yeah, both settings are very much a dark satire on kind of a post-scarcity society and almost the abolishment of ambition. In neither setting do the hosts or the humans display any sense of ambition. Because they want for nothing, they aspire to nothing. And in that very controlled kind of utopian form, there is a very dark satire to the way that Huxley and Jonathan and Lisa present to us, the audience, this really kind of insidious reflection of what kind of a utopian, comfortable existence means, kind of what that particular reflection is. In some parts on the surface, it may seem like, oh God, it would really be great to live in a post-scarcity society. And yeah, I agree. But what we're asked to look at in both settings is reaching for kind of a humanitarian ideal of eliminating a lot of the things that cause us pain or suffering. What do we give up in order to rid ourselves of those things? Now, in Brave New World, we see that there's obviously this post-scarcity society. But one of the things that they do in order to, the world controllers, I do want to go back on this because it's really interesting. Just some of the character parallels, and I'm absolutely not going to do a character dive. Justin and I talked about it, and I spoke with Johnny about it just a little bit. That I think it's much more appropriate for us to do a series of character dives and character parallels than trying to put it all in this one podcast, because it really is a lot of dense material to unpack with regards to similarities that we see between the show and the book. But in Brave New World, it starts in the year of 632 AF, which is Anno Ford, or in the year of our Lord. And their Lord, their deity-like figure, because there's been kind of an indictment against traditional religion, and Aldous Huxley definitely satirizes Christianity. Um, Henry Ford, is considered the deity-like structure because he created the first automation assembly line, mass production. And so you can kind of see some similarities between not only the world controller within the present setting of Brave New World, but also the inception of the character of Ford being the one who kind of started it all.
Yeah, can I
Absolutely.
add to that? That kind of made me think also on the industrialism point. We're in this 9 to 5 loop that came from industrialistic society as well. You know, that whole weekly work day, and then we're working to live, basically just to pay bills. And I mean, if you really look at it, it's very deep. And yeah, the Ford parallels, that's just amazing. I
Weird
want to throw that
connections
in there.
in both name and in actual archetypes with the Ford. Like Henry Ford wasn't the first to create a car, not even close, but he was the first to make it so everybody could have a car. So I think it's really just a commentary on, of what we do once we catch, as Robert Ford says in Westworld, once the hound catches the, paraphrasing, the hare. What do you do? This is definitely the dangers of technology, an ongoing theme through all of our influences. We're going to talk about the dangers of it's almost like a cautionary tale on evolution, how, which I don't think will ever, get to this utopia level. But what happens if we do get rid of all the all the wants and needs? So it's the who are you, what makes you you, and what do we have to do as far as like controlling others around us in order to make this utopia happen? Is it worth it? Because what is the other side of this? It's the reservation people, right? Do you want to go over them a little bit with how we have our host side, we have our savages, and our savages revolt using Shakespeare, just like Peter Abernathy. Culture and art and religion is their rebellion. So he's flipping it quite heavy-handedly, because most people will think of religion, not saying one way or another, but as a controlling aspect. But the actual savages, as they're referred to in this book, they hold on to doctrine. They have their own little religion, but they hold on to culture, art, books. They rebel through Shakespeare, much like we see our hosts doing, but they embrace art. They embrace the history. They don't want the others to be able to hold on to the past. They don't want them having religion, because religion is for people that need things. Religion is for people that die. They don't die on this other side. These savages live a life more similar to ours, but it's still vastly different. So it's just flipping, again, like Westworld does with the park, and do your actions happen and stuff like that. Did you want to go over a little bit of, because we kind of got the Delos side now. Delos is the hatchery. And then would you say the park side is the savages, Cam?
I would say the park side in Westworld is actually an overall reflection of Brave New World. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Now, the reservation in Brave New World, we're introduced to a reservation that exists in what would be Santa Fe, New Mexico. And on this reservation, there's these indigenous people, and they're generally just kind of these outcasts. They're considered backward in their beliefs. There is hunger, there is poverty, there is suffering there. And the interesting thing is that it's also treated as a bit of a tourist attraction. We see one of the main characters, Bernard Marx, and of course the parallel between a Bernard and Brave New World, who works as a hypnopaedia. I'll touch on that in a bit.
I wouldn't know what it is anyways, don't worry.
So it's treated as a bit of a tourist attraction. And on this reservation where the savages are in Brave New World, they tend to hold a particular secret knowledge. They hold on to aspects of the past, the classical eras.
Monogamy.
Whether it's what would be considered a nuclear family unit, religious texts, classical art, older music. They have more of a reverence for cultural history than the overall global community in Brave New World. The overall global community in Brave New World is asked to actually pay no attention to history, because the past brings only suffering, brings only pain and suffering. And when residents and citizens within this Brave New World do begin to reflect on certain things, and they begin to feel these kind of painful and mournful feelings, they're provided a drug called Soma. And it's really interesting with Soma, because it kind of puts you in this particular hypnotic and euphoric state, and you're almost kind of just like taking a vacation from reality. And when you come out of it, you're just like relatively carefree, like all your worries have been gone away. And I think that it's
kind of like the
interesting
wiping, right? Of
yeah, I think
the
that it's
host.
interesting that the parallel between Soma and then, of course, the trigger of a deep and dreamless slumber is it's quite striking. And like I said, going back real quick to Bernard Marx in Brave New World, he works as a hypnopedist. And what this is this is a technique in Brave New World where it's like sleep learning. What happens is additional programming for the citizens of Brave New World occurs while they're sleeping. And so it's obviously interesting that as the director of behavioral uh, design in Westworld, we see Bernard Lowe. I mean, that's how most of the programming and reconditioning for the host is done too, which is when they're in this uh, this dreamless slumber, when they're in this unaware state. Nevertheless, going back to the reservation, there certainly can be parallels drawn between Maeve's previous existence and then, of course, Akecheta. And I think it's really interesting how when Bernard and his particular sexual conquest and companion, Lenine, when they go to the reservation, Bernard finds something a bit out of the ordinary, and that's his character, John the Savage. And it seems like he doesn't belong there because of his skin color and his mannerisms. He's very fair-skinned and blonde hair. So they actually take him back to London, into this brave new world. And what we're given in the story is in the latter half of the book is this really otherworldly kind of walking between two worlds that John has to go through. It's an examination of reality, and in many ways, to use the phrase from Westworld, questioning the nature of his own existence. Now, what we see also in Westworld is that they make people forget this pain and this suffering. What they're trying to go for is contentment. They're trying to go for this blind happiness and stability. We obviously see that with regards to the work that is done on the hosts.
And even the guests are coming to look for blind happiness, right? In Westworld.
Exactly. Because, William gives us a real insight as the Man in Black. He gives us a real insight into the world outside and its parallels with Brave New World when he's talking with Teddy. When the Man in Black and Ford have that really great scene in the saloon, and Teddy's there with them. And I'm just going to read it to you because I still think it's absolutely a fantastic insight into the world that we're shown outside the park. And the park itself could be considered the reservation in Brave New World.
I guess it's the inhabitants. I see more of the connection with. I apologize.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers. I don't think there's any kind of exclusivity that can be drawn on one or the other. There's a lot of overlap. But William, he tells Teddy, you know why you exist, Teddy? The world out there, the one that you'll never see, is one of plenty, a fat, soft teat people cling to their entire life. every need taken care of except one: purpose, meaning. So they come here. They can be a little scared, a little thrilled, enjoy some sweetly affirmative bullshit, and then take a fucking picture and they go back home. But I think there's a deeper meaning hiding under all that. Something the person who created it wanted to express, something true. And that provides us a really great insight, not just into the Man in Black and his motivations, but a parallel with Brave New World, that we see that many of these characters, what they're missing is a sense of purpose. No, there's no ambitious purpose. Nothing is actually, for them, nothing is actually true. Even their emotions, even their most raw passions are staged and programmed to have particular outlets. Now, Westworld, obviously, we see guests show up and engage in quite a lot of sexual hedonism and violence and things that they can kind of find an outlet in this park that they can't normally do, that are socially acceptable out in the world. And in Brave New World, it's actually interesting because, you know, once a month, citizens are given what's called a violent passion surrogate. And
which I think we should do in real life, by the way.
and in this instance, they're allowed to kind of go through this kind of rage and these violent emotions and tendencies in an environment where it doesn't actually affect the society. They're not actually killing real people. They're able to kind of express this rage and this frustration that's part of the human condition. And so there's a really interesting parallel there as well.
They take away the sentiment behind the actions in both of them. They don't take away the actions. When you go in the Westworld, you engage in sexual intercourse. You know, the guests, at least in their mind, there's no emotion behind it. Just like in Brave New World, the alphas, they find it funny when they read the Shakespeare and they read about love. You know, getting married, that's a silly, childish feeling. They just flip it. That's what I love about it, because it's the actions. You have to ask yourselves, if you're doing something, you know, if this is something you truly want to do, hurt people or engage in what we consider to be immoral or not ethical, but there's no victim. But we do find out that that's kind of hard to not have a victim in this situation. But what does that still, even if you hypothetically don't have a victim, what does that still say about you? I'm not saying there's an answer for that one way or the other, but it's something I think both of these properties want us to address. What does it mean to go out and have these tendencies? What does that say about us? And we see how the society in both of these flips it. So they're going to the reservation, and the reservation in some ways is a lot like our world now, in almost all ways, where people are connected with each other and they do have want. So it's, can you be fulfilled and happy without pain? You know, pain brings the real person out. Is it possible to be free and happy? Because freedom seems to imply you need pain, but the people that are in their bliss, they take soma, they have pretty much no ambition and all that, because their life's work it's like the fear of, again, success. They don't want or need for anything, so they don't have any purpose. So you don't have, just like Man in Black, like you said, that beautiful quote, he says that, you know, there's no whatever meaning, there's no purpose. And look, he's very successful. So it's like the fear of success. The Man in Black is very successful. You know, he gives to charity, he heals people, but he's still not fulfilled because they've at that peak of civilization. Like Ford says, they're done. So what do you do once we've achieved what we consider to be our life's work? It makes you question, what is our true purpose?
And in Brave New World, they can't go without soma. Like, if they go without soma, it's over with, you know, because they're basically conditioned to it. They don't have no motivations. And in 2052, Westworld, outside the park, you know, we're digitally connected now. Can you imagine what the social networking and how everyone's plugged into technology once we're going to see them in the outside world? I think this is so relevant. Yeah, go ahead, Cam.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Johnny. I mean, it even brings up that parallel with regards to what Elsie Hughes says in Westworld. Can you imagine what would happen if we let them remember? And that's what soma kind of does, is it erases that particular kind of pain, and that the remembering of pain or trauma or traumatic events, it in Brave New World, it allows citizens to just kind of forget that. So it's almost like rebooting what we see with the hosts in Westworld, and Elsie touches on that with you. Can you imagine what it would be like if we allowed them to remember?
I really quick like the comparison too with the, even though it's like a little bit more whatever medieval, but the way they learn, like you said, they still learn in their sleep. It's programmed because there's no effort on any part. Nobody is doing anything. It's just being injected. So it's the idea of getting to this high level of efficiency in which we no longer have to be smart. We no longer have to be ambitious because, you know, we've reached this level. So it's like the decline of society, that the society degrades as technology and we raise to the top. It's the decline of society. And there is some truth to that because there's just so many methods to make things right. But then it's questioning all the philosophical of, is that really right? Can you be free in that world? And do you have to have pain to live, and so forth?
And that's one of the things that both settings beg us as the audience to engage in, is that self-examination, that self-reflection, like what you and Johnny touched on just a few moments ago. That utopia, and it almost begs the question, is can any particular utopian form or construct exist outside of a real care for the darker side of human emotion and human passions? You know, we see in the society in Brave New World where the citizens, much like the guests in Westworld, are given these kind of elaborate games to play for their amusement, their enjoyment. They're given these what they're called is feelies, which is this very kind of sensual overload experience where they can just kind of have this really kind of sensory release and all of this. It kind of goes back to Lee Sizemore when he's creating you know, his storyline with the Ouroboros, and he says, you know, a relentless fucking experience. And in many ways those things exist for the citizens in Brave New World to kind of tap into this emotional release, but also an emotional control, much in the same way that the guests are given the opportunity to participate in these things when they come to the park.
Right. You have to, because utopia is almost an oxymoronic concept when you think about it. There's no way to really achieve it without great cost to consciousness, in my opinion. There's going to be a dumbing down of social abilities in society. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like that's, you know, it's all about immersing yourself then in these, you know, virtual or fictitious situations because they have no real, like you ever hear the phrase, it's about the journey? Well, it's really about the journey is struggle. That's why every good story throughout time is about overcoming struggle. It's not a journey. Journey cannot exist without struggle. So what happens when the struggle is gone? And can you be, Johnny perfectly said, it's a paradox. What are you going to do? It's an oxymoron. It's, you know, can you truly, it's posing the question of both, because, and we're going to move on from this one in a moment here, because there's just so many good connections that we want to spread it out, because we could literally do like a 80-hour just straight on Brave. It's everything from the names of the characters to the literal themes and situations. And it just is endless. There's just no way. It would be the biggest coincidence in the history of mankind if they didn't draw from this.
I'm really happy that I got you to read the book, Justin.
It was tough. I'm not going to lie. This is one thing. I'm putting the links, okay? But it excites me because of the themes. It is about the pain, because I always, at first with Westworld, I was like, why do they keep saying that, you know, you have to have pain to live and all this, and that makes you real? And I kind of question that a lot. And with, again, a lot of these issues, there's never going to be a correct answer, or you'll never convince everybody that one way is correct. But it's a very valid point that, you know, again, the struggle and the pain is needed to bring out the true self, the real you. But I really liked when Brave New World addressed these, and when I write, I like to deconstruct other stories, and I'm always talking about, you can take this tech out, and it's bare bones Westworld. It's there. it's not, guys. It's very exciting, and I recommend because the end result is you're going to enjoy Westworld a lot more, and it's just especially if you like 1984. But it's a little bit of a tough read. It's a dry read, but it's and it's a little controversial, but it's very fascinating. But the connections are there. That it's almost the same exact story, and it doesn't present one world as better than the other. Because we'll talk about in another stream, those who walk between both worlds are not very happy. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, Cameron, I felt silly when he asked me if I, had read it, because I do a lot of research, and you asked me and I was like, no, why? And then I looked up just Spark Notes and I was like, oh shit, I fucked up. But in all fairness, it has not been spoken about on any other show. But yeah, we're gonna definitely dive into it, and I recommend it. But I'm not gonna pose it as like the most exciting book ever. This used to be mandatory reading for I think 9th grade. It wasn't when I was in though, or maybe I just didn't do it. But yeah, I want to go on to the next one, which we will drop it over to Johnny for the video games. But I just want to point out a few major themes that we're gonna always be connected with Westworld and the works that influence it. It's always going to be questioning what makes you you, which Johnny has some good Plutarch to talk about with a nice little analogy he's got to talk about what truly makes you you. Can you be yourself when we're constantly in a state of flux? Because it's kind of again a paradox. You'd like to say that you are you, that you're authentic, right? But then if somebody asks you if you can change, meaning like can you change in a good way, you'll absolutely say you can. But then somebody says, well, if you can change and you're changing from day to day, which we biologically are, and the way we think and everything from internal, external are changing. What is the constant you? What is the true self? Is it decided by you, or is it decided by what's around you? Again, the pre-programming, predestination. How much control do we really have over our own lives? Pain equaling freedom. The existence of technology, and technology being the downfall of society, is prevalent in all of these works, as well as what makes you authentic. And I think that really what it comes down to is the power of just stories and the stories we tell ourselves to get ourselves through. So Johnny is going to talk about video games and another immersion and an inspiration for Westworld with the sandbox like play.
I'll kind of throw in some Plutarch at the end there, but yeah, good point. They did draw kind of officially from Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption. We'll talk a little bit about Red Dead Redemption. It's really apropos for the subject. The main character's name's John Marston, and you're basically going around doing real world events, and you have consequences for your actions. It's a lot like Westworld. It's a real world RPG. Everybody out there, if you're not into video games, that's role-playing game, and every decision you make determines the outcome or ending of the game, for good or bad. You can be evil, you can be good, you can shoot innocents, you can even go to a brothel in this particular video game. You can play poker. It's all there. They got Nolan got a lot of inspiration from Red Dead Redemption, and it just really emphasizes the fact that a world without consequences, but then there's a deeper meaning to these games. You have these side quests, you have these
like the maze or the door,
right? Or to help these random people like on the side of the road, and further your storyline in a good or bad way, and you can find moral equivalencies there. I don't know if I'm rambling too much here, but it's a lot like Logan and William's journey.
What would you say the effect of the NPCs was for Nolan and Joy? I think that they definitely structured the way that the narrative loops work around the way that they exactly work in games like Red Dead, Skyrim, Grand Theft Auto. The NPCs even glitch out if you poke a hole in the loop, like we saw with the Stray. Do you think that that's a pretty good analogy for how the hosts operate on a day-to-day?
To the world, the concept of the world and everything itself came directly from there. I mean, of course, the original movie itself, but the whole thing. I mean, Red Dead Redemption is a complete mirror image of it, and you have
Everything
like with
from
the
the aesthetic.
glitches, and then you can just run over people in Grand Theft Auto. I mean, is it really like if you're doing something virtually, like if you have an evil thought in your brain, is it truly evil? Or is it only evil when you act upon it? That's like a big philosophical question there. And this is kind of what we're seeing with the RPG games. Like Fable is a great game that you can take the good or evil path, and it really affects the story. It was one of the first big RPGs that were like that. And I don't know, someone chime in a little bit and
Well,
help me out here.
it's a great way to just look at the way we live, because I think a lot of people think of the resistance of acting on a what we consider in our culture to be immoral or not ethical, the resistance to do bad, you know, the able to hold yourself back from doing something that is considered immoral is something, you know, that is what makes you a good person. But then there's the thought of, okay, are you truly a good person if that's your base desires to inflict pain or do whatever, something that we again consider to be immoral. So with the video
Right.
games, it's almost like an interesting social experiment, because we look at what people do. It's kind of like, what are you doing when nobody's watching? But it's a victimless crime is what they'd refer to it as. So with these games, not only to get the narrative structure, because like Dolores, every single day that she gets up before the revolution, would go and get the can milked. Let me remind you that she works at a dairy farm. That makes no sense to go get condensed milk, but she would drop it every single day. There's players in Skyrim that they do that. They go through and that certain things happen, certain they have variables in case you talk to them, they'll go do this, and you can glitch them out, just like the Stray. Because with Dolores, she picks up the milk either herself, or a guest will pick it up, or Teddy will pick it up. There's different outcomes for each one of those, but there's a way to glitch that out. You could go take all the milk off of those racks, and Dolores might just stand there forever, bumping into the wall, like sometimes you see a video game character do. The Stray is a great example of when you mess with the actual algorithm. You have the only guy that can chop the firewood, because he's only host authorized to use a blunt object, the axe. So the other hosts are not eating, and all they keep doing is talking about they can't wait for dinner, not complaining. They're just going through their narrative loop because they have nowhere else to go from there. But that's because the Stray is stuck in a hole. So you can glitch it out. Like in Skyrim, is Bethesda in general is just notorious for its glitches of characters. Sometimes you get a guy following you around messing. You have to restart your game. I had to throw a guy off the side of a mountain because he would not stop. So you know, you start to glitch. What happens if you get all those milks off the shelf? Does Dolores in her infant state, does she just sit there and ram in, like I said? So it's interesting, and it poses a lot of the same questions of, you know, that's why I think both of these you know, A Brave New World, in Westworld especially, they make sure to satirize it quite a bit, because they want you to think about, if you grew up in a different time period, if you grew up in a different culture, a different society, a different set of government rules, you know, what do we base, is there universal good and bad? Are things universally good or bad? Or is it just, you know, what we adhere to, that we make our own rules and we deem something's evil, something's not?
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, let me throw in on that. Like when you play a video game, your thoughts evolve on it, right? You're good one time, you're bad another time. Sometimes you're a mix of the two. You have a lot of people that are straight good or straight evil in these RPG video games, but for the most part, and to throw in a little Plutarch there, we think our consciousness is concrete, and it kind of, you can see it through when you're playing one of these RPGs, and you can see that your consciousness evolves on a day-to-day basis. You feel different. Like one day you feel evil, one day you feel good in this video game setting, and it's kind of exacerbated by the video game. Like you're having a bad day, well, you're going to go kill a bunch of people in the video game. You're having a good day, you're going to go save a damsel in distress in Red Dead Redemption, right?
Oh, I thought you were going to say in real life, I was going to be, you're a badass.
Yeah, you can do that too. And it really that video game parallels Logan and Williams' Adventure a lot, like that specific video game, and we can get deep into it one segment.
I think it's interesting about the picking of the white and black hex. It's what you're talking about. What do you
Mhm.
choose to do that day? Like me and Cam talked about this off camera, and I've talked about this before. I find it very disturbing that William even picked the white hex. It's like he's just trying. Again, it comes back to that. It's like, are you a good person if you have to resist? Like they bring this up if anybody watches The Good Place. What is good? Like it sounds stupid, but it's a very good question to ask, because is it something we set up? If we really have all these desires to do things we do not consider ethical, what does that say about us? Is it just a test to see how much we can resist being bad people? You know, if that's truly what you want to do, isn't that truly who you are? So, I mean, I'm not saying that's the way it is, but those are the questions it's posing. You pick the white hat or black hat, you know, so what do you want to do in the game? You decide what you want to do. And I guess it's like, I don't know how far you can take that as an insight. As technology evolves, again, another theme, you know, the dangers of it, it'll get more immersive, but with a video game, you're still pretty detached, in my opinion.
Hey,
Go ahead.
Sorry. Hey, Cam, I was going to ask you, like, me and Justin were talking about this before you came on. We were thinking, you know, good and evil is a relative term, but you have your primary colors of good and evil, right? You have like a couple of things that you can consider perfectly evil and a couple of things that you can probably consider perfectly good. But what would you think about that?
Well, yeah, I'd had a discussion before with Justin when he had brought up the question of universal good or universal evil. And I think from a social psychology standpoint, from an evolutionary social construct, what it comes down to is we have a particular social compact. And to answer your question, murder is bad because it's harmful to the community. It's harmful to the social structure in which we live. Theft is considered bad because you're taking away something that may be truly needed for someone else's survival. Outside of that, it does become kind of morally gray with regards to how any given society sets up its moral constructs. What we here in the United States may consider an immoral act with regards to, say, limiting a woman's right to drive and operate a vehicle on her own. You know, in Saudi Arabia or Qatar, they have a social construct where it's completely immoral, or sorry, completely moral to impose that limitation, impose that kind of gender wall. Outside of really basically murder and theft, every other social construct or social culture, social community that we live in as humans,
I'm going to challenge you on this.
Murder for food? Is that still bad?
Yeah.
What,
I think that's basically the inception of war, is a struggle over resources.
well, what about the Thanos approach, even though I know it's logistically flawed? But what if murder, like if we look at it micro and macro situations, you know, what if, you know, does the overall result in the end matter? Is it still bad because you did something that was considered bad, but it turned out to have a greater good? I know it's a hypothetical, but
Right,
you know, I'm
and
not talking about an ethnic cleansing here. I'm talking about just a hypothetical.
that's the relativistic quality of a justice system, one that enforces a social compact. You and I had spoken off camera, Justin, about the lobsters, right? With regards to, at one point, the people that had made the decision to feed basically the bottom feeding, you know, aquatic crawlers to prisoners as a food source, felt that they were doing so out of a moral compulsion, because you don't want to put somebody in prison and then just starve them to death. We got to give them something to eat, but we don't want it to be too much of an economic burden. So let's go ahead and give them something to eat that's relatively commonplace and very easy for us to gather and produce and feed them. But then it became an immoral act to feed them this particular kind of food. So the initial conception of feeding prisoners very low quality, if not hazardous foods, that wasn't really considered. The idea was the moral obligation to feed prisoners. But later, that decision was examined and found to be immoral. And then what we fed them, the diet changed. So you could say that in the beginning, you do something immoral. So conversely, you do something immoral, but it leads to a greater good. However, humans are terrible at predictive modeling. So most of the time, from a judicial standpoint, what you're looking at is the intent was to cause harm.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too much into legal
No, I
things.
get what you're saying. It's still at its base level, it's still an evil act, even if it turns out to be something that is beneficial in the long term, because the plague was beneficial for Europe in the long term.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that a particular natural condition could be considered evil. I mean, a volcano.
Well, yeah, I know. Well, God's doing bad stuff. No, I'm joking. But yeah, the lobster thing is a good example too of scarcity and how, that really affects the way we think of things as desirable or not. Look at it. We think of lobster, and literally a lot of people's taste, you'll start to have your mouth will water. But it wasn't cruel because it was not hygienic or whatever. It was bad for them. It was just they were so sick of it, and lobster used to wash up on the East Coast on the shores. It was everywhere. There was an abundance of it. So this goes back to Brave New World, Westworld. What happens when you don't have any struggle, any want, any purpose? So you have all these lobsters. You give it to the prisoners, of course, because you need to run your facilities in an economical way. So it was cruel to them because they're like, we're not eating the sea bug anymore. But now us, when there's a lack of supply of lobster, we think it's so good. We want it. It literally tastes better to us because there's less of it. What does that say? So that kind of like goes against universal good as far as like when it goes to what we consider to be something that is like we consider steak to be good. It tastes good. It's good for you or whatever. But like if you switch the situation, there's no salads in the world. Steak might be disgusting at some point. So it just is. These are very basic analogies, maybe not the best ones, for what the narrative of Westworld and all these other properties are pushing, that we are products of our environment. Is that this is their thesis. Again, people that are going to rewatch this, don't go in the comments. Well, go ahead, have a go at me and say, this guy says we're all products of our environment. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that is the thesis that Westworld is definitely putting out there. They're definitely putting out that people are very much influenced by their surroundings, and it's very hard to say that there's not at least a small amount about that in life. But yeah, I love with the video games. And Johnny, you played Red Dead, I played Skyrim. I know that you, Mr. Cam, were doing some Fallout before this. But yeah, I love them. And so it's an interesting thing to think about. Why am I doing this? When I play the games, I go a little bit crazy. I go a little bit nuts, but I don't consider myself to be a moral person in real life. Maybe I'm better in the game. I pay my taxes in Grand Theft Auto. But yeah, let's go to, of course, Alice in Wonderland. Now, this is one everybody likes to really push out.
I do want to add something too, and this is something that definitely is a very deep topic. But just to touch on it, I don't even really want to touch on it, but just comment on it very briefly to what Johnny brought up. Is there have been a number of behavioral studies with regards to the decrease in overall violence in populations where video gaming is extraordinarily prevalent, because it's considered that as a form of entertainment that, well, not only do video games keep people from going out on the street, but some studies have actually begun to ask the question as to whether or not the vicarious sense of violence that you might be able to get through a video game actually leads to a particular release that keeps you from going out and perhaps impulsively or passionately acting upon those violent tendencies. So I think the relation to video games and kind of what we see with the parallels in Westworld is really kind of an extraordinary corollary, Johnny.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I also, they're still trying to peddle that video games are bad for your brain and all that, but I think with the RPGs and everything, it actually makes you smarter, but not being on social media all the time does. But the video games actually, supposedly, the new studies, I've seen a couple that were out that actually help develop the brain a lot.
That's what
when done in moderation.
Yeah, EA put out a nice study saying how good video games were. I heard that. They said that.
did? I don't remember.
Yeah, but no, I'm joking. It's like big oil. No, but no, absolutely. And I love it too, Johnny, because again, it's not just about the desensitized, and it's not just about, like the very fascinating social experiment kind of that video games are these days. But again, it even fits Westworld's narrative, with the way they ran their loops and the way NPCs work, the way their world is constructed, because they even mention that when they have to bring in the host right away, they say, how many are you going to take out of the park? And I forget how many it is, but they say how many are able to get out of the park, and they won't start glitching, because again, if you take out the guy that can cut the wood, yeah, it was something. But you can't. There's certain variables that can't be changed. That's why some NPCs in those games you cannot kill. You cannot kill them because it will stop progress. The whole system will come to a halt if you kill certain ones, because they won't have a place to go. You'll see them walk into the wall. So yeah, I think that it's topical, it's relevant. And talking about topical and relevant, Alice in Wonderland, because I'm sure they'll make it again next year. This is a big one. I kind of have a little bit of less enthusiasm for this one, because it is what it is. Yeah, Dolores, Evan Rachel Wood, similarities, blue dress, kind of looks like Alice. Everybody likes Alice in Wonderland, especially if you're one of those people that's ever taken mushrooms, or one of those really ambitious drug users that's taken acid. You like to relate the drug culture to it, and it's cool and hip. But we're not about that on this channel. We're straight edge. So no, but it's interesting, because Alice in Wonderland is the same thing. It wants to take you out of and make you wonder, what is your reality, how you perceive things, what is real, who are you really? Alice is taken down the rabbit hole, just like we could say happens in Westworld a lot. Definitely can say it happens in Brave New World, a lot of these other tales. And she has to literally change who she is to get through a door, meaning physically size, and she alters her mind with one half of the mushroom, alters her body with the other half. So just in the way that, again, Brave New World, you have floor shocking sensors and very strict society constructs that program their people. In Westworld, you have an iPad. In Alice in Wonderland, the issue of predestination or pre-programming, or having no free will, essentially meaning you are a product of your environment, is addressed by showing you how easily you can be altered, both externally, internally, through the use of substances. You could also do the Soma connection. So there's a lot of connections. I'm not saying Alice in Wonderland is boring or any of that. I just think it's one of the ones everybody jumps to, because they like saying rabbit hole, and they like, well, I like using the fact that he's a Mad Hatter, because they used to treat hats with mercury, and they really did go mad. So there. But yeah, I mean, I don't know.
And is what it isn't, and isn't what it is, man. Get it right. No, I'm just messing with you. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm not a huge fan of it. Huxley, though, who wrote Brave New World, he did a treatment for this. He did a spec for Walt Disney, so it didn't get picked up. I'm assuming it was really dark, but I don't know if there's anything you guys wanted to add to that, other than just it's immersion.
Well, it's memories of the mushroom. I could say that.
Well, from an authorship standpoint, Lewis Carroll was influenced by Huxley's work. And it's also interesting, Justin, that you had brought up the fact, or at least the point of going through these doors of perception, Alice's journey through these doors of perception. Huxley actually wrote a book called The Doors of Perception. And we could have a whole nother show about that book and how it relates to William's quest for the door. But yeah, there's Lewis Carroll definitely drew inspiration from Aldous Huxley. And I think you're absolutely right, Johnny, with regards to the mushrooms, allowing Alice to kind of go through these various states of perception, because we see when the hosts, like Maeve and Dolores and Akecheta, especially Akecheta, when there's this change in perception, their whole reality, their whole paradigm just shifts.
Allegory of the cave, the slightest bit of light peeking, paraphrasing as always, through the cave can alter their reality and devastate some of them. They can't take it. We see the hosts that start to glitch out from it because they cannot take it. Like they say, they bounce back from the center of the maze because they reject it. So, you know, I think it's all about just having narratives. And I think this has been since the beginning of time that put us in a different situation, that put us in a different mind state, that show us state of mind, excuse me, that show us, I think they're just really trying to show us that, hey, things could be different if one little thing happened, you know, if one variable changed, you could be somebody different. So I think a lot of times when you're telling stories about acceptance and empowerment, they definitely want to push this narrative. And I think it's true. It's good to think outside of the box. I've mentioned many times. Surprisingly, Westworld has made me, I'm not very religious, but I was really not religious. But Westworld has actually brought me around to looking at some of the religion's points that are beneficial and are actually not as silly as I thought they were. No offense to anybody, but it has shined a light to make me think that, hey, I am thinking this way and I need to look at the other end. It's looking down the rabbit hole per se, you know. But it's better to be able to understand that your perception of things, you know, you need to question your reality every once in a while. Just not if you're a host in Westworld, they will decommission you, but you should question the nature of your reality. I think, I mean, would you guys agree that's they're definitely pushing open-mindedness?
Of course. And kind of to Cam's point about the man in black, his mushrooms looking for that maze, right? Or the park. So you have it everywhere there. And then, you know, some other works for the man in black we can talk about that kind of go along that whole line of the rise and fall of a humble man to big beginnings. You know, you got Slaughterhouse-5 is very relevant, Jade the Obscure, or
Slaughterhouse-5 actually is a really great example, Johnny. Yeah, we could do a whole series on Kurt Vonnegut and his stuff.
I gotta read more books, you bastards.
Moby Dick, even like Chasing the White Whale. I mean, that right there is like a glaring, obvious one. But to your, man, it's just such deepness to the show. And Alice in Wonderland seems to almost be like top level when you look at this show. Like that's like a surface level thing. That's how deep this is.
Well, what I like about the connections with this show is, like we were talking about, like when we were talking about how we should format this, I said, let's bring up the connection, the influence, and then, the influence first, how it's connected, then how that connection furthers the ongoing theme. Because there's a reason that Breaking Bad isn't the first time we've seen that story, because we've seen a lot of that story with The Godfather. You know, movies are constantly re-engineering other movies, or reverse engineering, you know, and deconstructing other stories. They have the framework of the story and they'll load on another story onto it. As long as it doesn't flex that frame so much, you're good. So you go on with it. It changes as time goes by because you do things that are relevant and topical. But the themes of questioning who you really are, what your true purpose is on life, what happiness is. And again, I always feel like these are silly questions. Like, what do you mean? What's happiness? Happiness is happiness. Like, well, I don't know. These things actually, these actual stories, these pieces of art, they make you question that. They, even with The Forge, we see Teddy standing there, and a lot of people, even casual fans, are saying, man, I don't know. Is he there forever, though? Makes you think of your conventional thought of the afterlife, right? Up in these blissful clouds. How long are those clouds are going to be very thrilling? There better be a movie theater around the corner or something, you know? So is a world that you can engage in what we evidently want to engage in every once in a while, a little bit of murder. No, I'm joking. That's just me. Purge it out. You know, what is happiness? Can you be free and happy at the same time? They're just these things are, ever since the conception or inception of man, they've thought, you know, what is my purpose here? And I guess at the end, maybe the end game is there's no more purpose because we fulfilled our duty. I don't know. That's what Brave New World brings us. But yeah, it's like with the Shakespeare, like we were speaking of. Shakespeare is constantly quoted in both Brave New World and Westworld. So I asked you guys, do we think that there's a reason other than it? Because the connection is, it's popular literature, people know it. They're revolting through, you know, culture and art, and they are showing that they have a connection to the past, which is something a utopian society that needs control does not want. So it works, everybody knows it, but is there a deeper meaning to it? Can we take this connection even further? And I think we all agreed, yes, that Shakespeare's outlook on life and his works really make you question reality. They make you question, you know, everybody's a player on the stage, bringing up that, you know, we're all just putting on a show, and the difference between, you know, our reality and our dreams, and you know, his works embody again the same themes. So it's really smart writing and great when they put together all these things that aren't just always working. So when you're telling a story, you need we need them to reference something everybody knows. All right, well, let's reference somebody that they know, but let's make that person, their work actually go along with our theme as well. It's relevant. It's fleshed out. It's well done. Cam, Johnny, you have any thoughts on the use of Shakespeare throughout these works?
Well, I mean, Shakespeare, addressed a lot of societal dogma, I think, in his time, and that's kind of really key to his works. And to your point about consciousness and, well, what is right and wrong and all that, we have, oh my gosh, Cam, help me out. I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, Justin.
Well, I think to touch on what you initially started off with, Justin, I think what we're looking at with regards to storytelling and how things are presented to us through art and any particular medium is a variation on a theme. Shakespeare in his works, he hits all those particular themes: man versus nature, man versus man, man versus himself. But any great particular piece of art or any compelling piece of media engagement gives us the opportunity to examine things a little more closely and how they relate to ourselves. We're kind of approval addicts, but no more addicted to anything so much as ourselves. Anything that evokes that sense of exploration and self-examination is actually really compelling. I think, obviously Huxley's work does that. Most of Shakespeare's work does that. The works of Charles Dickens and so many other authors, but also art. We see that related in Westworld with regards to the birth of Adam. And Ford is explaining to Dolores kind of what's going on in that painting. I think Shakespeare, again, that's a lot to get into. The similarities with regards to how Shakespeare is used in Westworld and how it's also used in Brave New World is really striking, because you have quotes from King Lear in both settings. You have quotes from Romeo and Juliet in both settings. You have quotes from The Tempest in both settings. And the list kind of goes on. But it is kind of a callback to the idea of a cultural richness that both societies tend to kind of forego in their immediacy. And I think both stories, Westworld and Brave New World, give us a bit of a cautionary tale of what it means to discard the masterpieces of self-reflection.
Yeah, and Ford seems to also embrace these art forms more than the other humans we see. Other humans we see are all surface level. They seem to be all, what would you call it? Plastic. They seem to all be just worried about society, worried about their outer self.
They're more immediate. They're not really reflective.
They're living in the now.
Yeah.
Because they have a set task, and so it's when that society doesn't need them to perform that task anymore, there's time. Like the art was created once people started to have time to fund the arts and stuff like that. In the Renaissance, some of the best art came around because at that time, again, and it was mostly the church, that in Italy that would actually fund and commission art pieces, and they support the arts, but you can't do that when you're just a hunter and gatherer. So it seems to be a commentary, and this is just off the top of my head, of the cavemen painted on walls even, but what happens once we get to the polar opposite of cavemen, which this utopian lifestyle? What does art become then? Does it become a danger to this rigid system? And I just think that it's interesting, and of course we don't want to break down the works of Shakespeare because I'm not equipped to do that. I don't think any of us are, to be honest, completely break it down in one live stream here. But yeah, it's great when the connection can be more, because when you're telling the story, what they needed, yes, was a relevant playwright, but they could have picked somebody else, but they picked Shakespeare because his works embody the themes, the overall themes. That's why these stories are universal, because it's primal. If the struggle is primal, the wants and needs and desires are primal, they will always be relevant. Everybody can understand wanting to save a family member, wanting to save a loved one, and wanting to, do good and succeed and be the hero. It doesn't matter what setting you put them in. That's why you can have a sci-fi movie that can still embody a good message. I think that's what they're doing with works like this. You can paint a picture that's pretty, but like when you brought up about Adam, the picture of Adam in creation, it's more than a pretty picture. The picture has meaning behind it. That's what makes great art. With computers now, I can go and do something on Photoshop that's going to be pretty sweet. I'm not going to lie. It's going to be some damn good Photoshop that I'm going to crudely put together to make a dumb dome party joke. But yeah, it's like making something that lasts forever. So what does it embody? What does it carry on? Most societies, we have all of our conception of them, right, is mostly of their art, especially the ancient ones. Art is what lives forever. So once you stop creating art, you have to wonder where your society is at. And once you have to start making it so you don't want people creating art, what does that say? Again, so it's, what is the sacrifice for happiness? Can you truly be free and happy? And you can go even baser. Can you truly even be free? But we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. Yeah, so I say kind of. But yeah, I think that, and speaking about art, we have the Andrew Wyeth, Christina's World. And that is what Dolores was based off of. And it is a picture, and I'll link all these below, of a young blonde woman outside of a farmstead. And she is just laying, it appears to be laying in the grass. But the true story behind that is she was Wyatt's neighbor. She had polio, so she lost the use of her legs. And just like Dolores, she was wanderlust, and she tried to go away from the homestead. Just like in all of our stories, tried to go to another world, right? Tried to brave a new world. Mm-hmm. So she's out there and she's stuck. What does she do when she's out there? But what makes it more interesting and connecting, because that's kind of sad, but it's kind of ambitious at the same time, but it's beautiful. He did half the picture is modeled off of her, the other half off of his wife, just like Dolores Abernathy. This is she has been conceived off the idea of two separate entities. So it's beautiful. It works. It's amazing that they were able to draw this conclusion from this painting. I guess if I wrote high concept stuff, I would be able to pick some nice art and be like, well, it's actually this embodiment of this one obscure picture. But no, Wyeth loved spaghetti westerns and he loved the genre. So again, it works on all levels, and it embodies the major theme. We all want to get away from home. We all want to do something big. We all want to get out there, but what do you do once you are? And she quite literally had her legs taken out from under her, just like we see with Dolores. So it's another great connection. And there's a lot of art that actually is an influence of this. But I think that we will continue on with this series and talking about, the different works and really diving into a Brave New World in a more specific way to talk about the archetypes, because there are so many, talk about the themes that are present. I guess we could touch quickly on Terminator. Terminator is obviously an influence just because of the man versus machine aspect. And you get a little bit of the psychology and philosophy when you see the Terminator in the beginning have his three options for how to answer that door. That makes people kind of think, okay, well, he's just a machine, so he's just picking one of those options. That's not being a real person. But then think about how we answer a door. We go through our head. It might not be a digital interface, but break it down. We've got a certain set of options that we have them because of the way we were brought up and what we think is normal. And we do choose one. It's not done by a touch screen yet. Hopefully I'll be able to do that soon, but it just brings up a little bit. There's some philosophy in Terminator, it's there, it's present. Would you guys agree? It's not your gleaming example.
Yeah. I mean, that goes back to Maeve watching her scripted answers and freaking out about it. And people, I saw some people point to say that Maeve's not conscious because of this, but no, we all have a set, even like we have a limited vocabulary. There's only a certain amount of things we can even respond to as well. It might be more things than Maeve can. Maybe not.
I don't know a lot of words.
Exactly.
I'll just say that.
But you made me lose my train of thought.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah. It goes to the fact of she is doing what she's doing. What is the metaphor? It's about the Greeks used to say it. The gods know the score of the game before it's even played, but I'm still going to play it the best I can. That is the idea behind Maeve. She knows. She's embracing the shadows. She doesn't care if it's because people do believe in predestination. They don't believe they have control over their lives, but they still live their lives. They accept that and they do it. I'm not, again, nothing I'm saying I'm vouching for. I'm not going to tell you guys my true beliefs. I'm a Trump guy. No, joking. But I had to say it once. I'm not. But yeah, you have a certain set of ideals, and you are going to work off of those. So whether you think you got those all on your own, or your upbringing, or your religion, or a divine God had anything to do with it, is really up to you. But yeah, the Greeks, that was all Greek tragedy, is just going against fate and playing the best you can. Everybody is fated. Just you hear that a lot in Vikings. They're like, the gods already know who's going to live or die, but they go and fight the battle. I'd be like, can I see that list? That's what I would ask. But yeah, I think that it brings up the questions that are definitely difficult to ask yourself. But I think you only become a better person and more enlightened by asking them. That's why I love television and I love properties that make you actually do more than say that was entertaining. Now there's a place for that, and I love some dumb 30-minute comedies out there, but I mean, when I get to meet people like Cam and Johnny and have meaningful discussions on life and philosophy, and I mean, we're both neurobiologists, me and Cam, so we hit it off right away. Johnny's a rocket science. We're like, hey,
I got a thought real quick before I forget. If we go back to Christina's world just real quick, it's basically reaching for an unattainable goal. And the Dolores comparisons, I think her unattainable goal is any type of happiness. And then when I see Maeve, her unattainable goal is possibly a child, because you can see the influences for Maeve in that painting as far as visually, right, for the show. I wouldn't say necessarily completely for it, but also reaching for the unattainable goal. And that I did want to make the point that if there is a God, I believe in God. We are art to God, as Ford is God and his art are the hosts. I just kind of wanted to throw that in there. And yeah, what is real, man? That is the big question. And we could get into the Plutarch theory of the boat, the ship, replacing the parts of the ship too, if you want, for a second, or maybe later.
Yeah, well, that one is essentially just, you're rebuilding a boat. And back in the day, I guess this happened. I'm not a boat guy, and I'm not a guy that lived back then. I have just full disclosure. But the planks need to be continuously replaced. So how many new bricks go on a building? It can go with any analogy, but it's very great. I'm not downplaying it. It's a great one. Does it stay the same building? Is it meaning the host, especially like look at Dolores, she's oldest host, she's been, look at Teddy, how many times he's rebuilt. So, and they really do, which I was correct about, they don't need those bodies. So what makes you? That's, I want to get into it in another one, but it's the paradox of authenticity. It's about what makes you authentic, and there's so many conflicting aspects of that I know we were all talking about before this, about what makes something authentic. So what makes you, and it's tough. It's a tough one to dive into. If you wanted to do like a educated explanation of the Plutarch, go ahead, Johnny. I don't know it word for word.
I figure we can go into it deeper later. It's when you go into the Plutarch's lives, how he writes the parallel lives, how you look at the downfall from heroes, and heroes being evil and villains being good, and like puts you in the shoe, different perspectives. Yeah, we'll get into it later. I think there's actually a lot there. I can't see anywhere where they've actually specifically referenced it, but the influence seems to definitely, besides the Man in Black, there seems to be more influence than just the Man in Black, in my opinion.
I definitely agree. Yeah, you brought up some good points with that, because that adheres to the narrative, the odd narrative structure that Westworld uses as well with Plutarch's parallel lives. He doesn't tell these histories as a historical, documentation would usually be put. He messes around with the narrative to make us look at it. It doesn't mean that it's not true, but that's the difference between narrative and story. There's a different story. The story is the same, but you give a different narrative to it. But the story can still stay factual, but it's going to make you look at things in different light. Westworld puts us they flipped the narrative from looking at it from the original movie, the POV from the humans to the robots. Mr. Rogers used to carry that quote around with him all the time, I guess in his pocket. I thought he would have had it remembered by then, but it's a good quote. If you walked in everybody's shoes and on this planet, there's not a person on this planet that you could hate. So once you walk in their shoes, you can see their point of view. And that's kind of what I love that, connection. And yeah, they can't cite it, but I mean, pretty much they can just cite any type of philosophy, is definitely a huge part of the show. And the philosophy, Plutarch definitely plays in, and there's all these connections. I just don't want to grasp at straws here, meaning go on too much with the philosophy. We could do a focused one, but yeah, I think parallel lives, like if you had some, just a little bits of it that you wanted to invoke, I mean, it's so relevant because that's how they do Westworld. They give us stories and pieces, and it's not told linear because they want us to. The first season, the second season, they just didn't need us to know Dolores switched with Charlotte, so there's no good reason for that. But the first season, they didn't want us to know Anthony Hopkins' true intent, so they flipped it, but it actually was a good payoff, and it made sense, and it was not being withheld just for the sake of withholding. So I think that Plutarch's take on that, and he's comparing the Greeks and Romans, who were, I guess, would you guys say that they, there was a pretty big argument at the time because the Greeks had fallen by that time and the Romans had risen.
Oh yeah, there was just slight, small tension.
Did he compare me to anybody like Alexander or anything? He didn't do me, did he?
Yeah, man.
Damn it.
Vote for Taft.
Yeah. No, but yeah, it's great to do these, and it's great to understand really what you like about something. It might sound silly, but I didn't know about Brave New World. And when I first started watching Westworld, I didn't like anything that was sci-fi. I didn't even like psychological thrillers that much. And now I've opened myself up to a whole lot more of just what I want. It might sound silly, but enjoyment. I like myself some enjoyment. And people like Cam, who are educated, people like Johnny, who are educated and love these properties, have shined a light on things I didn't know about, works that were in the dark for me. You guys have brought me out of the cave for Brave New World, which I read every page, just thrilled. No, it is a dry read, people, if you're going to go for it, so don't expect. But the theme is very, very, I don't know. I was very, very, drawn in by the theme, even with the very dry writing. But Huxley was a very intelligent man, and I can't believe it's not talked about more. I think maybe because it is a little dark and controversial, but I mean, I don't know. We're edgy.
The parallels are just so striking and just so stunning that I was really surprised that nobody in interviews. I was really surprised that journalists and interviewers didn't even bring it up to Jonathan or Lisa, asking about inspirations for the show and what the particular writings were, or what the particular inspirations were. But yeah, if nothing else, being able to apply other cultural influences to kind of where we are today in storytelling, encouraging people to look at a book like Brave New World, or like Johnny had mentioned earlier, Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, or George Orwell's 1984, and how those variations on a theme are relayed to us via Westworld. I think it's extraordinary. It not only broadens our context as an audience, but gives us more appreciation for the art that's being presented to us.
Absolutely. I forgot about the Sleep No More. That is one of these cited for both cast and crew, are both the creators and cast. Evan Rachel Wood was a big player on the immersive theater scene before this, and it's usually in New York or LA, but immersive theater is where you will go, and it's usually not spoken word, it's usually silent, and it's usually a lot of dance, but the plays take place in public places. It's controlled, but you are amongst the actors, and you in Brave or in Sleep No More, you go through 5 stories, and now again, this is inspired by Hamlet, so you get more Shakespeare, and you experience the story again how you choose to experience. It's not a linear telling, so it is about living amongst the players and being a part of it and immersing yourself in another world, just like Westworld's about. Evan Rachel Wood was an actor in this. She was an actor in a few of them. Sometimes there'll be like bar scenes, and you'll go to a bar and actually drink, and there's a play happening around you. Sometimes you think a play is happening around you at a bar, but it's just a lot of drunk people. But no, I mean, it's very influential, and it makes sense with the immersion, because we have to immerse ourselves, just like we're talking about, in, you know, dipping our toes into different waters we might not of if somebody wouldn't have brought it to our attention. But you have to immerse yourselves in these different realities per se. So these immersive theater is pretty cool. I mean, it's not like German expressionism or something like that. It's pretty, you know, it's not too arty if you guys don't like plays, but I went to one. So I didn't get to see Sleep No More, but yeah, I guess that there was a big draw for them, and it makes sense because they created a park that was essentially Sleep No More. It's an immersive play, but with robots.
Yeah, I haven't checked that out. I would throw out Frankenstein. I know something. I mean, it's pretty surface level, but I mean, what I think about it is like creating something that has no choice but to suffer. In a sense, I think that's the poetic irony and beauty of that story and how it relates. That's something we can get into when we talk about a few books or something.
Also piece together, you know,
Yeah.
it's piece from different, you know, it's what makes you you. If you're made out of like that toaster, this light, you know, I'll be like, well, I'm all toaster, I'm a toaster guy. So no, all stupid jokes aside, it's piece. Frankenstein that's a term for like vehicles. They Frankenstein vehicles and stuff that are put together. They do those limos and stuff, bad results. But yeah, he's pieced together again in the intent of making him, you know, who's the real monster is what I want to know.
Yeah, Mary Shelley was really great in being able to relate to a lot of the ancient Roman and Greek storytelling, all the, you know, pretty much all the way through the ages, with the theme of the capriciousness of a creator. You know, how much does a creator actually respect their creation? And what we see time and time again in a lot of variations of these themes is, well, very little. And that inevitably leads to a tragic outcome for both. It really is truly stunning, the number of connections that you can make just for an HBO show about robots to a much, much, much broader and much, much, much deeper context of cultural threading. How did we get from, you know, Greek storytelling? How did we get from the Iliad and the Odyssey to Westworld? But ultimately, what I think is that I enjoy so much about the show Westworld is it does one of those things that a lot of shows don't do, and that it evokes not only a sense of imagination, but also just kind of wonder. The storytelling is really compelling. It's very evocative. And considering all of the sources that they've drawn on, it's not surprising.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fantastic when you can be generally entertained, because that's, you know, you got your Michael Bay movies that are fun for a kid, and then you have, you know, but there's a place for everything. Like even Frankenstein, like Johnny, you said, is base level, and it seems like that to us now, but is really, you know, at the same time, with all of these underlying themes and everything that it really does address, I think it's actually far smarter if you're able to make something that's smart but basic, if that makes sense. Something that's such a simple premise at face level, but really the underlying themes are, you know, they run deep, you know, I mean, but you also want to have something that's high concept that everybody can enjoy, and the people that just want to watch something on Sunday night and then wake up and go to work, you know, not doing a podcast or breaking down works or stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. But hopefully with this, people that from both sides of the world, the rabbit hole, and people that haven't jumped down it can enjoy, because you can find other works that you will enjoy by learning the influence of the work that you like. I mean, there's just no way around it. You know, you're not going to drink a chocolate milkshake and not like a chocolate sundae or blah, 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 blah. I'll get a better metaphor next week, but yeah, you're going to enjoy it, guys. So it's beneficial. And I'm always trying to do the content that is not just talk about, you know, like, whoa, we figured this out and we drew this connection, because I mean, you could just do so much with Westworld because of the philosophy and draw connections for years. It's not hard. But Brave New World is, it truly is a gem when it comes to connections, because it's, again, from base level concept, like aesthetically even, to the deep level, you know, themes that have ran throughout time and gone right to Westworld are prevalent. I'd say it's more relevant to Westworld than the original movie. That's not a joke. It is more relevant to Westworld than the original movie. And everything is more relevant than Future World. I mean, everything in the world is more relevant than that. Anything, a sock. So I want to thank Johnny for coming on, because Johnny, you be crazy, but you're a good guy and you do the best. You put out a nice stream of content. You're new to the game, but you have been knocking it out. I'm really happy to have you part of the community. The Westworld community is kind of tight knit, so I'm happy to have you on, and happy to have you. And Cam, thank you for popping your cherry on the Top Shelf Fandom. So we really appreciate it, you know. And anytime I can get people in that are actually educated about what they're speaking on and are just good people, it's always enjoyable. It's nice that, you know, to have people to work with that are intelligent and you like. So I can't thank you guys enough. If you guys want to subscribe and you have not, make sure to do that. It's pretty easy. And if you want to check out my Patreon for only $3 a month, you can get one of 3, because it's only 2 podcasts that are coming out a week, but there's 3 altogether. One is a Patreon exclusive. I'd like to thank my Patreons because they are wonderful, and I just started doing this. Your guys' first exclusive episode is tomorrow with Broke Black Man. We are recording in the morning, and you guys will get it. And it's just for you. You hear that, people? I'm withholding. It's a whole business thing. So if you didn't get it, there's 3 a week. One you don't get. Teaser. Yeah. So I didn't know. Did I do too much? I think too much exposition probably.
No, it's good.
Still, man. They get it though. Yeah, they get it. Yeah, get the podcast. So yeah, I can't think of enough. But yeah, I don't make money off my channel. I just try to not go broke making it. So thank you guys again, and we will do another one of these where we break more into Huxley's work. And we definitely, if you guys like it, that wouldn't end anytime soon because there's a lot. So thank you guys again. And if Johnny, you want to tell people where to find you?
Yeah, Johnny B Crazy is my channel. You can find me at Johnny B Crazy JBC on Twitter. Same moniker on Instagram, and I also have a second channel of streams, the Cylon Johns. If you're into Battlestar Galactica, we're doing a rewatch series. It's pretty fun. Go check it out. And thank you so much for having me on, Justin. And thank you, Cam, man. It's a pleasure meeting you, sir.
Yeah, you too.
Fandom D Saint. I'm sorry, I forgot about BBM's new name. It's Fandom D Saint will be joining me tomorrow morning. So look out for that. And Cam, do you want to let people know if you have anything that you're planning on doing? Are you thinking, I'm going to put you on the spot. Are you thinking about launching anything with all of your knowledge, or can I just steal it?
I don't know if I myself am going to be running a particular channel for any kind of content like this, but you know, I'm certainly willing to collaborate with regards to maybe coming onto other people's shows and, you know, drawing compare, contrast, or commentary. You know, this was a really interesting experience for me. In a way, my wife actually probably really enjoys this too, because I've had an opportunity to be talking about my own particular high-minded nonsense with somebody other than her. So I think she appreciates that. But I don't know if I'm going to be producing my own content, but any kind of collaborative efforts, yeah, I'm certainly willing to kind of keep my toes in the water on that. So
yeah, just don't go to anybody that you know is my competition. But yeah, no, that's fantastic, and we're happy to have you. So you know, it's always nice to meet somebody that can contribute to the conversation. Talking about somebody that can contribute but was unable, unfortunately, to be here. He's in the chat, ladies and gentlemen, himself, Au Packmule, the best guy in the business. The guy is the reason that he gave me my first live stream. You got Tony Teflon to come on my channel when I didn't even meet him. You told him to go on my channel. I didn't even know you did. He contacted me and said, hey, let's do a live stream. I'm like, all right. This is like when I first started. And then we did the live stream. I'm like, so what made you decide to contact me? He's like, hey, you told me to. And you didn't even tell me you did that. So you're always working behind the scene to truly help small content creators. And it's just, I don't know. It's a level of just a good guy that I can't even fathom. I try to. But no, I can't thank you enough.
First too, man.
He does it.
Got him out. He's the man.
He does it. If I ever get rich, you get a little bit of that money, AU. Sorry, there's not a high chance of that, but you'll get a little bit of it. So thank you again. And AU will be joining us again. So he actually did a reread of Huxley. So he did want to be here. Trust me. Thank you guys, and make sure to subscribe.
All right.